the black male body was a subject of fascination for many white women. Black men were portrayed as hypersexualized, and white slave-owning women often used them as opportunities for sexual exploration in the face of cultural norms of moderation and virginal virtue. In other words, women felt entitled to full control and ownership over black bodies. White women who were exposed for their relationships with black men could rely on the mantle of white female purity to avoid any blame being placed on themselves. From this developed the myth of the black rapist and the belief that black men inherently desire white women. Violence against black men and the need to maintain slavery could therefore be justified by slave owners as necessary to protect the virtue of white women. A lot of the articles that I found in relation to my research question involved maternal exploitation that slave women faced from slave-owning women. Many slave-holding mothers or mistresses viewed their role in respect to their children as the guardians of their souls and moral guides. They took great pride in educating their children to be the next generation of sophisticated plantation owners. Of course, their ability to spend time with their children to educate them was facilitated by enslaved women doing all of the household work, as well as bathing, dressing, feeding, and general supervision of the white children. White women believed that black women were uncaring mothers for their own children, but could be refined and taught how to make good caretakers for white children. Additionally, the belief that black women were unfit mothers prompted many mistresses to take direct control over their slaves' children, with many going as far as to make the children call her mother. Mistresses were absolutely central to the systematic separation of enslaved children from their parents. Selling a child away was a useful and powerful threat to keep slaves submissive. As the children grew up, it was up to the mistress to decide which ones had the most potential for future service and which ones should be sold. Disturbingly, the slave-owning women also tightly controlled what slaves were allowed to reproduce and be in relationships. Often, they would have one enslaved man have children with multiple enslaved women, denying black men the opportunity to be fathers and have families. The testimony of formerly enslaved mothers and children reveal the intense familial trauma created by the cruel and heartless separation of parents from their children and husbands from their wives. Maternal exploitation was also common through the use of enslaved wet nurses by slave-owning white women. Thousands of ads for enslaved wet nurses from the late 18th century into the 19th century reveal the creation of a niche market that exploited the physical bodily products of enslaved women. Some women used enslaved wet nurses because they were not physically well enough to nurse their own children after giving birth. Nursing also carried the potential for dangerous health conditions like blocked ducts or breast infections. However, there were numerous recorded cases of mistresses who were physically able to nurse their children but simply did not want to, with one explaining that nursing made her feel like a slave to her children. White women were doubtlessly complicit in the preservation of the institution of slavery. They benefited from the wealth it brought to their husbands, but also from their own ability to own slaves and use them as a means of financial security. They asserted their control and dominance over enslaved men through sexual abuse and dominated enslaved women by ripping apart their families while forcing them to care for their owners' children. Although they often lacked legal and political power, slave-owning women relied on their status as slave owners to provide them an outlet to exert control and authority over something.